Most people believe self-control means staying quiet. It doesn't. Real self-control is the ability to decide what deserves your emotional energy and what does not. Because every day, something is trying to provoke you. A rude comment, an insult, a disagreement, someone ignoring you, someone disrespecting you, someone saying exactly the thing they know will get a reaction. And for many people, the reaction happens instantly. The body becomes tense. The heart rate increases. The mind starts preparing an argument. And within seconds, another person has influenced your emotional state. But the real question is simple. Why should someone else have that much control over your mind? A mind that cannot easily be provoked is not emotionless. It is disciplined. It understands the difference between feeling an emotion and obeying an emotion. That difference can completely change the way you respond to pressure, conflict, criticism, and manipulation. When something feels threatening, your brain is designed to react quickly. This system helped human beings survive dangerous environments. Your ancestors did not always have time to calmly analyze every threat. A sudden movement in the environment could mean danger. A hostile person could mean conflict. A threat required attention. So the brain developed systems that could respond before slow, deliberate thinking had fully taken over. The problem is that your brain can react to social threats in a similar way. An insult is not physically dangerous, but your brain may interpret it as a threat to your status, identity, relationships, or sense of self. That is why a few words can change your entire emotional state. Your body reacts. Your thoughts accelerate. And suddenly, you feel the need to respond. Immediately. But this is where composure begins. A psychologically strong person learns to create a small distance between the trigger and the response. That distance may only last a few seconds. But those few seconds can change everything. Because when you react automatically, the situation controls you. When you pause, you begin controlling the situation. Most provocation has a simple purpose. It wants access to your emotions. Think about what happens when someone deliberately tries to upset you. They may criticize you, mock you, question your intelligence, attack something important to you. Why? Because an emotional reaction is often predictable. Anger makes people speak without thinking. Frustration makes people easier to manipulate. Defensiveness makes people explain more than necessary. And impulsive reactions often create mistakes. A provoked mind becomes easier to predict. If someone knows exactly what makes you angry, they can often predict how you will behave. Many people misunderstand calmness. They think a calm person feels nothing. That is not true. There is a major difference between suppressing emotions and regulating emotions. Suppression means pretending nothing happened. You feel angry, but force yourself to ignore it. You feel hurt, but refuse to acknowledge it. You push the emotion down. The problem is that ignored emotions do not always disappear. They can return later as resentment, stress, irritation, or sudden emotional outbursts. Emotional regulation is different. You recognize the emotion. You understand what triggered it. But you do not immediately allow the emotion to make decisions for you. Imagine anger as information. It may be telling you that a boundary was crossed, that something feels unfair, that you feel threatened. The emotion itself is not necessarily the problem. The question is what happens next. Do you allow anger to control your words? Or do you use the information without surrendering control? A strong mind can say, I am angry, but I do not have to become destructive. That is far more difficult than simply reacting. One of the most important psychological skills is learning that attention is limited. Every argument costs attention. Every insult occupies mental space. Every unnecessary conflict consumes energy. And if you respond to everything, other people can control your focus simply by creating noise. A person who constantly provokes you does not need physical power over you. They only need your attention. The moment they know they can make you angry whenever they want, they have discovered a psychological button. Press the button. Get the reaction. Repeat. An unprovocable mind begins by asking a different question. Not, how do I prove this person wrong? But, is this worth my energy? That question creates distance. Because many conflicts are not actually problems that need solving. They are invitations. An invitation to argue. An invitation to defend yourself. An invitation to compete. An invitation to lose emotional control. And you do not have to accept every invitation. Sometimes the strongest response is a clear answer. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is walking away. And sometimes it is recognizing that another person's behavior says more about their emotional state than it does about your worth. Provocation becomes powerful when it connects with identity. Someone does not simply criticize your opinion. They challenge your intelligence. They do not simply disagree with your decision. They question your competence. They do not simply reject an idea. They make you feel rejected. And suddenly, the conversation is no longer about facts. It becomes personal. This is where the ego becomes vulnerable. The ego constantly wants protection. It wants to be respected. It wants to be right. It wants to win. And when any of these things feel threatened, the mind becomes defensive. But consider this. Do you really need to defend every version of yourself that exists in someone else's mind? Probably not. People will misunderstand you. Some will underestimate you. Some will criticize you without understanding the full situation. Some may deliberately try to create a reaction. You cannot completely control what exists in another person's mind, but you can control how much authority their opinion has over yours. A mature mind understands something important. Being misunderstood is uncomfortable, but it is not always dangerous. You do not need universal approval to remain stable. You do not need to win every argument to protect your identity. And you do not need to explain yourself to every person who demands an explanation. The less dependent you become on external validation, the harder you become to provoke. The most powerful moment in emotional control happens immediately after the trigger. Something happens. You feel the emotion. And before reacting, you pause. That pause interrupts automatic behavior. It gives your more deliberate thinking time to return. Instead of asking, "What should I say back?" ask, "What outcome do I actually want?" This changes the entire situation. If your goal is simply to release anger, you may react impulsively. You may win the moment, but create a larger problem later. But if your goal is to protect your peace, maintain your reputation, solve the problem, or establish a boundary, your response may look completely different. Emotion focuses on the present moment. Strategy considers consequences. That is why calmness can look powerful. A calm person is often thinking about the next step, while everyone else is trapped inside the current emotion. Not everything that happens has the meaning you immediately assign to it. Someone does not reply to your message. Your mind says they are ignoring you. Someone speaks briefly. Your mind assumes they are angry. Someone criticizes your work. Your mind interprets it as disrespect. But these interpretations are not always facts. The human brain constantly creates explanations. It tries to understand what other people mean. The problem is that emotional states can distort those explanations. When you are already stressed, neutral behavior may look hostile. When you feel insecure, criticism may feel like an attack. When you expect disrespect, you may detect disrespect everywhere. A more composed mind learns to separate two things: what happened, and what story am I creating about what happened? That distinction can prevent unnecessary conflict. It does not mean ignoring real problems. It means making sure you understand the situation before emotionally committing to an interpretation. This is psychological maturity, not reacting to every possibility your mind creates, but responding to what you actually know. Some people mistake emotional restraint for weakness. They assume that if you do not react immediately, you are afraid. But impulsive aggression is often easier than control. Anyone can shout. Anyone can insult. Anyone can send an angry message. Anyone can react within seconds. The difficult part is remaining aware of your emotions while choosing your behavior anyway. That requires discipline. True calmness does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. A calm person can still set boundaries. They can say no. They can leave. They can confront a problem directly. They can end a relationship. They can refuse disrespect. The difference is that these decisions are not controlled by emotional chaos. There is a difference between, "I am angry, so I am going to destroy everything," and "I understand what is happening, and I have decided what I will tolerate." One is reaction. The other is control. A major source of emotional frustration comes from trying to control things outside your control. You want people to understand you. You want them to behave fairly. You want them to appreciate your effort. You want them to stop disappointing you. But other people have their own thoughts, emotions, fears, habits, and motivations. You cannot control all of them. The more you demand that other people behave exactly as you want, the more vulnerable your emotional state becomes. Composure begins with accepting reality. You cannot control what someone says. You cannot control whether they like you. You cannot control whether they misunderstand you. You cannot control whether they try to provoke you, but you can control your response. And that is enough. Because once you stop trying to control every external situation, you can focus on the one system you actually have responsibility for, your own mind. Not every response needs to happen immediately. This is especially important when emotions are intense. An angry message feels urgent. A defensive response feels necessary. An argument feels like something that must be won immediately. But urgency is often created by emotion. A delayed response gives your nervous system time to settle. And when your emotional intensity decreases, your perspective often changes. You may realize the comment was not worth answering. You may recognize that you misunderstood the situation. Or you may still decide to respond, but with more precision and less damage. Time creates psychological distance. And distance creates perspective. Before responding to something that triggers you, ask, will I still care about this tomorrow? If the answer is no, the situation may not deserve your full emotional energy today. The easiest people to provoke are often those whose identity depends completely on external approval. If your self-worth depends on everyone respecting you, one insult can destabilize you. If your confidence depends on always being right, disagreement becomes threatening. If your identity depends on appearing successful, failure becomes terrifying. This creates a fragile psychological structure. A stronger identity is more flexible. It allows you to be wrong without feeling worthless. It allows criticism without immediate collapse. It allows rejection without questioning your entire value. This does not happen by convincing yourself that you are perfect. It happens by accepting that you are human. You can make mistakes. You can improve. You can be criticized. You can be misunderstood. And none of these things automatically destroy your identity. The more secure you become internally, the less emotional power random opinions have over you. Nobody becomes emotionally controlled overnight. Your automatic reactions were developed through years of experience. So changing them requires repetition. The process begins with awareness. Notice what provokes you. Is it disrespect? Being ignored? Being criticized? Feeling rejected? Feeling controlled? Once you identify your triggers, you can begin observing the pattern. What happens in your body? What thoughts appear? What do you usually do next? The goal is not to eliminate every emotional reaction. The goal is to become conscious before the reaction becomes behavior. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen a new pattern. Each time you choose silence instead of an unnecessary argument, you protect your attention. Each time you separate facts from emotional interpretation, you reduce confusion. Each time you establish a calm boundary, you prove that control does not require aggression. Over time, composure becomes less like something you force, and more like something you practice naturally. The goal is not to become impossible to hurt. That is not realistic. You will still feel anger. You will still feel disappointment. You will still encounter difficult people. The goal is something more useful. To make sure your emotions inform your decisions without controlling them. Because the moment every insult creates a reaction, your emotional state belongs to the people around you. But when you can pause, observe, and choose, something changes. The trigger loses its automatic power. The insult becomes information. The conflict becomes a decision. And your emotions stop being commands. That is the psychology of a mind that cannot easily be provoked. Not a mind that feels nothing. Not a person who accepts everything. But a person who understands one powerful principle. You cannot control everything that happens around you. But you can decide what happens inside you next. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is not react at all. Because when everyone expects to control you through your emotions, your calmness becomes the one thing they cannot predict. Subscribe for more interesting videos.